So I've been trying to put these videos on YouTube, and sometimes that works. But two of my recordings thus far, YouTube is telling me that it's not a compatible file format. However, I have successfully uploaded, well, two other videos of the exact same format. So I don't know what's going on. And I should figure it out. But in the time being, until I do get it figured out, I just created a Google Drive folder, and I'm going to share it with you all. I don't remember. Did I send you guys the link?
I think so.
Okay. Okay. So good, you have that. And so I'm just going to drop the files into that folder, and so they'll all be there. It's not the ideal way of going about it, but at least, you know, if you want to revisit the material, or, you know, you want to look at them for any reason, you'll have access to them. So I just wanted to give you that update. So my plan for today was to spend our time talking about the assignments that some of you have turned in, and others of you will be turning in the near future. I was able to read all of those. So I'm talking first about the trends and issues in special education list, the 10 topics. Thank you. And
you want that turned in right now?
In person, I know that in our meeting I told you that it just had to be a list, like just like 10 issues, but that again, that was inconsistent with what I had said in the syllabus. I had asked for like a brief description of the issue. And so I think it's good if you write a brief description, but since I was inconsistent in what I was telling you that I was expecting, I won't hold you accountable to writing the description. However, I would highly encourage you to do it, because it'll just get you kind of thinking about it. And, you know, maybe putting a bit of extra thought into it will, you know, kind of tip you one way versus the other in terms of making a choice for the annotated bibliography. So what I would like to do, so I know that I have, let's see, I have Daniel's, so I'm going to put you guys on the spot.
Do you want those turned in now if we have it done? Do you want it now?
You can turn it in after class.
Okay.
But I am going to ask you to share your list with us. So if you have it handy so that you can read it, that would be great.
Okay.
Awesome. So I have Daniel's, Jessica's, and Amy's. So before we get into hearing from each other about what our 10 issues and trends are, what were your thoughts about this assignment? Anyone, fire away. Was it easy? Was it challenging?
Well, I
Did you learn something new, or was it all old news?
A lot of the resources were pretty like generic. I found like, oh, it's just technology, it's a thing, and I'm like, okay, yeah, well, I knew that.
Okay, and what resource was that?
There was stuff like there's like blogs and stuff, and then I think the one that you had the link to, I kind of dug a little bit, and they had more stuff there.
Oh, the Council for Exceptional Children.
Yeah, and then what I found really helpful was I went to like the Pierce Library thing, and I was just I looked up, because I knew I was gonna have to find articles to do it on anyway, and so looking at those different articles and like reading the abstract was where I found a lot of stuff.
I'm interested. What so was your search criteria just like issues in special education, or did you those generic ones and put them into the search engine?
Yeah, so I just did like special education issues is where I started.
Always start with the most obvious, you know?
Yeah, and then I kind of go from there. I don't know. I like doing that kind of stuff. I like to research. It's like treasure hunting, and like, ooh, I'm going to find out. And then it kind of led me down different sort of things, and I was able to find, you know, from their topics that were more interesting. And so I kept my list of 10 super generic, knowing that I was really going to focus on those top 3. And yeah, I don't know.
Here's a question. Was anyone like able to sit down and just come up with 10 issues and trends in special education, or did everyone have to do a bit of research?
A lot of the things I came up with were like based on like people I already follow, like on Instagram or have read in like blogs in the past.
Okay.
That kind of still seem, I think, to be relevant. I might have done the assignment wrong, so we'll see when it gets to that point.
And so, one thing that I said when talking about this assignment is that, yeah, if you do some research, you're certainly going to find like, kind of the sanctioned issues in special education, which, that's one perspective. But I'm not trying to, set any parameters around what you want to explore in your research. I mean, this is an assignment that I ideally want you all to enjoy and to, kind of deepen your understanding about something that you're interested in. So I would never, say, oh, that's not a good issue. Because, I kind of see why you might say that, Daniel, but I think all of your issues are very important and, they're
Okay, cool.
certainly relevant. So thank you.
Cool. Yeah.
I went to that CEC website that you gave us, and
Yeah.
that was really easy to come up with some issues real fast there. And then I went on to the Wilson peer-reviewed article place, and it was easier to find articles for certain issues than for others. And as a result, I actually kind of picked my article that I want to go over according to how easy it is to get access to the articles.
Right.
Although, because if I have a real easy way of getting an article, it's going to make it easier for me to do more research with it. So, because I thought all of them were relevant, and it was just hard to decide 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 the right order. So I would edit it that way.
No, you gotta think realistically. You could have like the coolest kind of theory or idea around, but like if you can't find like anyone in the field who has already talked about it or can kind of give you a jumping off point, like that's like the nature of science. You always build off of what someone else has done.
Yes.
Unless you're, well, I think most science, it's a progressive kind of cumulative effort. So you can make your life challenging if you, try to think outside the box too much. But those, those kind of less familiar or less popular ideas are important too to investigate. So just kind of walking that line. Okay. So I am just going to go in order of your names here on Canvas, okay? And Daniel's first. And
okay.
So I'll just ask you to go through your list, and if you just want to read the little, descriptions that you have, great. And then, everyone, if you have any, questions or observations, feel free to chime in. I think we can just make this into a, a very fulfilling discussion by just kind of investigating these things together.
Okay, cool. So my first issue is gender identity and special education students. So my main reasoning behind this is we have like a student in our classroom who claims that they're like a gender other than what they were assigned at birth. And I'm just curious, this student is also kind of developmentally at like a role play preschool type stage.
Okay.
So I'm just kind of trying to figure out like if anyone's done any research on like, do students with like severe autism or other disabilities, like if they fully grasp what that means, or if it was more just like this student is role playing.
How old is the student?
He is, age-wise, he is like 7, 8. Developmentally, I would say probably like preschool, kindergarten.
Okay.
So then my second issue was bullying.
I had something to say about your first one. So yeah. I know that there's a lot of research out there on sexual identity, and I know that's something completely different than gender identity. But I feel that there are, maybe you're not going to find any academic research.
Uh-huh.
I would imagine there are a lot of like blogs hosted by individuals on the spectrum.
Yeah.
Well, there's a great website, but it's named. I'm gonna get it for you, Daniel. But it's basically
Okay, cool.
it's an online community for people on the spectrum,
Oh,
and
nice.
kind of discuss life,
Yeah.
up and such. And so that could be a good place to start.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, because a gender identity, that's a very kind of high level cognition. It's like a meta.
Yeah.
How do I think about, kind of like how I interpret or identify?
Right.
And so, yeah, there's a
Can
very.
I change one of my topics now to that one? I want to read about it.
Right.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So you said that he goes to a school in which he does a lot of role playing?
No, he
Okay. He's just
the student is really like just into everything that's like stereotyped as like a girl thing, and like they've said I'm a girl, but like in that moment I'm not sure if they were like in role playing mode, because they do a lot of role playing as like I'm this character from Powerpuff Girls, or I'm this character from blah blah blah.
Right.
So just trying to figure out if, I guess, that student led to more of the interest in that topic.
Excellent. That's a good one.
Thanks. My second one is bullying. Just both from students who are like typical towards students in special education, and then like the other way with students who might have like an emotional disturbance or some behaviors, and kind of just how we can best help students who are who have disabilities, like help them cope or learn how to not be a bully if they're one of the students who is.
Right. And I can tell you now, that's a topic that you will have no trouble finding a lot of research on. Like bullying in special education is a very hot button issue over like the past 5 years, 10 years.
Oh, cool. Third issue is a lot of, I know I've said this in the past, like the not my student. So as like my district in general is pushing more towards inclusion, how do we help like gen ed teachers and gen ed peers understand that these students are a part of their community as well, not just, oh, they're part of, Mr. Daniel's classroom, that's where they should stay. No, like we're gonna come to specials and lunch, and how can we make the schools more welcoming? And
very kind of like territorial mindset. Like, oh, this kid is
yeah,
not in my class, so it's not my student, and therefore, not fully kind of my responsibility.
right. And I guess my fourth issue kind of goes into that, but more like from kind of like a top-down issue, like how do we make the school as a whole more inclusive? How do we make sure that all students are welcomed? Like we have songs at our school that like say everyone is welcome here, but it doesn't always feel that way when, people don't want to interact with you for whatever reason.
Right.
And if I'm going too fast, let me know, or too slow.
Perfect.
Number 5 was transitions. In our previous classes, we had kind of learned about like how important transition is, but also kind of that's like an area where we're not seeing as much success as we would like.
Right.
So
Here that you were specifically focused on the elementary to junior high transition.
yeah, and I think really depending on your district, like I know Tillamook does like a K2 school, I think, and then like a 3 to 5, and then middle school, and then high school. Mm-hmm. So just kind of knowing like what transition strategies you can use to like help both families and the students themselves better navigate that next stage of life.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of, I mean, there is, doesn't seem like it, there actually is a lot of focus on like the transition from high school to adulthood.
Right.
It's like making these earlier transitions successful and smooth will contribute to a smoother transition down the road. So it's equally important and very significant. I mean, I reflect on the time when I was in junior high school and, went from junior high to high school, like that was a very kind of significant change.
Yeah. Issue number 6 for me is a movement that I've seen on like Tumblr and Instagram a little bit called Wear Red Instead. I've read from a couple blogs from people with like Asperger's and autism that Autism Speaks does a lot of things that are considered not great by those people. And I know it's like hard to make a blanket statement of, oh, this whole organization is, doing things that are harming the people they're claiming to serve.
Well, think about that. What is the Autism Speaks? Do you know?
It's the puzzle piece, right?
Puzzle piece. So what does that imply?
Autism.
Autism is what?
It's a puzzle we're trying to solve.
You solve the puzzle, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like this puzzle that we need to solve. So that can go in different directions. Yeah, if we think about the puzzle of trying to better support people with autism and being successful, in life, well, that's an important puzzle to solve.
Right.
Autism Speaks also funds a lot of research into basically biomedical research.
Yeah.
What are the genetic underpinnings of autism? What are the biological causes of autism? Okay. What happens? Eventually they created a test for Down syndrome, right? So you can, very early in a pregnancy test for whether or not your child will have Down syndrome and then have the option to make the choice of aborting or not aborting.
Mm-hmm.
That is an inaccurate test, though, I will say, because it was inaccurate for me.
Oh, really?
Oh, wow.
Because one of my children.
Its value is,
Yeah, one of my daughters said that when I took the test, and she said that it was going to be Down syndrome, and she is not Down syndrome at all, and in fact is one of the top kids in her class. So
I thought it was very accurate, but I guess
No.
it's going to be false positives.
It's actually really a poor test. I know 4 of my friends who got it, and 2 of them, their boys were going to have Down syndrome. Neither one of them. So when you've got that chance, I just won't even bother taking those tests. But yeah,
I didn't take it for my second daughter after that.
Interestingly, when we took it for my daughter, and we went in to have the results read, 2 things. First, the doctor's name was Dr. Downs, who read our Down syndrome test to us, which I thought was interesting. And then they got the files mixed up and they read us the wrong kid's results. You read the results and then like the nurse runs and she's like, wait, that's not the results. It was a negative test. We were like, oh wait, what? So they had to get our files and we were just like sitting on eggshells for like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
That's
But anyway, my point really in bringing up that test is that I've read somewhere that there are now fewer people with Down syndrome in the world because this test can be accurate. And some people will choose to not carry the pregnancy to term. And I think, people with Down syndrome are valuable members of any community, and they always have been. And the same thing with autism. If they find a way to test if a fetus is going to develop autism, well, people are going to start, having the option to not carry that pregnancy to term. And, what do? We're kind of limiting the human variation in our population. That was a very long discussion about kind of why some people with autism are against Autism Speaks.
Yeah. My 7th one was talking about the Common Core and just how high those standards are, and how do we help all of our students meet parts, if not the whole of that standard, and how do we decide, oh, my Wi-Fi might have crashed. I'm not sure.
You're here.
Okay, cool. how do we decide like what's the most important? Issue number 8 was talking about healthcare costs. Not something I know a whole lot about, but just kind of interested to see how we can make, like how that can affect families' lives. I'm assuming that like most states have a way to help fund and take care of people with disabilities, but I'm curious like what classifies as a disability according to that. And
Right. I mean, I do know, since I worked in the field of ABA and early intervention, it was at a time when like some healthcare providers were starting to cover those services. But still, you know, you would hear that it's like dealing with any insurance company, they don't want to pay for anything. And so it's like the length that you have to go to make your case can often be, you know, daunting. Aaron, you were saying something.
Can I ask a question? Isn't it Medicare that, is it Medicare or is it Medicaid that that usually covers it, the paperwork that's handed out during IEP meetings? I remember sitting through multiple IEP meetings, and it was either Medicare or Medicaid paperwork that was handed out by the teacher.
Okay. Off the top of my head, I don't recall.
Do you guys know?
It's for older people, and I think it's Medicare.
Yeah, I always get them confused.
I think it's Medicare.
Medicare. I think I remember. Yeah, is that right?
Medicare is for the elderly.
Medicare is
I
older.
remember if I like care, like, oh, my great grandma needs special care, whereas my students need financial aid. Is how I.
Genius, Jessica. I like that.
Nice mnemonic device to remember the difference. Good.
That's how I learn, man.
Okay.
Daniel, back to you.
My last 2 issues were related. Oh, I'm hearing myself, but oh well. They're related. I have a friend who got a cochlear implant, and she talks about that on her Instagram. And I guess like within the deaf community, that's kind of an issue of like, oh, you're not embracing who you are. And she's felt some like, I guess you could say like bullying or like stigma from people within like that community. And I'm just kind of curious if that's like a widespread thing that goes like across disabilities, or if it was like that thing in particular. And then also.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. I'll wait till you're done.
And then my 10th one was talking about like speaking versus signing. Like I know, and that could be just methodologies of like within dealing with, or not dealing with, but helping people cope with their disability and be successful in life. Like, is there enough evidence to support that one way is better than the other, or is that kind of more like a personal preference? And then like with that, how are we making sure that we're embracing of all the people, despite whatever like course of action they take?
Right. No, I think that, like, I think one of the like first disability like self-advocacy groups was people, you know, well, people with physical disabilities, but also the deaf community, who really kind of stands about, you know, the fact that, well, you know, the form of communication that we use and the way that we live our lives without the ability to hear, like that's who we are. And so it is a core component of our identities. And I know that like the autism self-advocacy community kind of modeled their kind of approach off of that like this disability is fundamentally who I am. And so when you start saying things like, oh, you know, advocating that I need to get like a hearing aid or a cochlear implant, well, that's, you know, you make the argument that you're trying to change me. That's not who I am. I think you could find a lot of information on kind of the kind of deafness as self-identity and the reason. Excellent, Daniel. Well, those are some excellent issues. That, make the first three your top three. However, if you want to, whatever one of those you would like to choose is going to be fine.
Okay, cool.
Okay. So I'm just going to go through and ask those who turned it in already to share. And then if you haven't turned it in yet, but you have it or you just want to talk about it, I'll invite you to do that, okay? Okay, so after Daniel, I have Jessica. Was she here? No? Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I'm here. I need to unmute. Okay. So I didn't really write like
You didn't have to.
with it, but yeah.
You can write them now in person.
Yeah, I kind of wrote it in my head already.
Excellent.
So the first one I picked was effective transition planning. Specifically, I'm going to be focusing on transitioning out of high school and into, working, secondary education, things like that.
Would you be interested in looking at transition for a particular group of individuals or just transition in general?
I was thinking more with the kids that I've focused a lot of time working with. I have a couple kids with autism that I've done a lot of work personally in that, and it's really interesting. And also my family members as well. My brother was never diagnosed with autism, but he is solidly in that spectrum, and so I'm really helping him as an adult, trying to help him figure out work is it's a challenge.
Yeah. How old is your brother, if you don't mind my asking?
He's 26.
Okay, so that means he was born what year? You do the math for me.
10 years after me. 93.
93. Okay. Yeah, so it's interesting you say he was never diagnosed, but certainly, you believe that he could be on the spectrum. Effective 2013, as an adult, you can't be diagnosed with autism anymore, right? They've set a new requirement, the DSM-5, and the age of onset needs to be by I think it's 6 months or something, 6 months of age.
Yeah.
Whereas before the DSM-4 revised is basically the diagnostic manual that turned autism into a spectrum.
Right.
Classic autism, you had Asperger's, you had developmental disorder not otherwise specified. And kind of the publication of that book kind of corresponds with this autism epidemic that we hear so much about.
Yeah, I know my mom's has a lot less patience than I do, and she's really angry because she was really sort of trying to advocate for him in high school, hey, he's different, and they're oh yeah, well, every kid's different. And
Some are different in different ways than others.
No, but she's different. So anyway, I mean, that's something that I'm really interested in learning more about, and how kids and young adults with autism, how they can continue to lead happy functioning lives. So that was kind of what I was thinking. The next one was about training of general education teachers in special education, and that was kind of similar to what Daniel was saying in different ways, making sure that different studies have been done on teacher education, and if you're going into general education, how much are you learning about special education kids, and how you're going to have these kids in your classroom, so you need to know what to do and how to not other them, and how kind of that saying not in my this isn't my kid, this is a SPED kid who happens to be in my class, and how to provide stuff for them.
Our good friend James Kaufman had a bit to say about that, didn't he?
He did, and that was kind of what got me thinking on there. I was like, okay, all right, I can see this, and
I like
all
we
the
as special
questions.
educators have to get our own house in order first. Right?
Yeah.
We got to clean our houses first, before we can tell other people how to clean their houses.
Yeah. But it's also at the same time like, but I have kids in there now, and I need to make sure that they're doing okay.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, it's happening. So
it's happening. They're there. I can't be like, hold on. Kaufman said I need to clean my room first, so I gotta I got kids in there now. So that's kind of where I was going with that. The third one, I almost want to break this into two.
Mm-hmm.
There's two different things, but it's kind of the same. So it's school safety and mental health services. The school safety, it can mean, like what Daniel was saying, where it's actually like, is this like a welcoming environment? Like we have these posters, whatever it says, all are welcome here, but like, is it really? Especially for kids, which includes like bullying. But I was also thinking about school safety as far as like incidences of most of the threats that have happened at my school of violence towards the school and stuff have been from kids that are on my caseload and with lower intellectual abilities. And so just kind of like, how can we make sure that these kids are safe and really understanding the consequences of what they're doing? But then related to that is mental health services. So I had a student who, she's on the autism spectrum, but then she also struggles with her own mental health as a reason, her trying to understand how she's different really affects her, because she's aware that she's different and kids don't like me, everybody hates me, I should just go kill myself, and and it's really sad. And so how mental health services and special education can work together to better serve kids.
Right, because certainly I always talk about autism just because that's what I've kind of worked. I've been in that community for most of my professional career. But yeah, I mean, there is a lot of comorbidity with autism, like anxiety disorder and depression. For those reasons, starts coming about at that age where you start really perceiving that there are kind of fundamental differences, and you see what everyone else is doing and how they're being treated, and you recognize that you are not being, provided the same treatment.
Yeah. So those are my top three.
Okay.
Then the next one I have is about placement of special education students. So kind of just, I was looking at different studies done on how, like the trend for, I was like, oh, inclusion, everybody in the general education classroom, this is what we do, it's great. And like, really, is that the best for the student? How can we be more mindful of, same thing, right? How can we be more mindful of that? Technology use, that's when, like I said, I mean, I'm not super passionate about it. It's kind of a thing, but yeah, how are we using technology? What technologies are out there? There's also the argument that I saw, like we have all this technology, but super cool, but if it's not being used correctly, then it's just a really expensive decoration in your classroom.
Well, it's interesting. We brought up kind of the fact that especially people with autism can feel socially isolated, maybe ostracized by their peers. Technology can be very useful toward that end. I mean, certainly, establishing relationships online is not the same as a face-to-face relationship, but, blogs and, other kind of forums, they don't require as much skill with kind of the nuance.
The social cues and all that, yeah.
There's definitely been people who have thought about, how to best kind of leverage different forms of technology for those reasons. I heard that they have robots that help teach kids with autism about nonverbal communication. Like these robots that will like mirror, like it's that kind of help you get better at appropriate nonverbal communication. So there's some interesting stuff happening in the
Interesting.
technology sector for sure.
Huh.
Also for students with visual impairments, like the kind of navigation tools that are available on smartphones.
Mhm. Yeah, so that one was neat. Evidence-based practices. What did I?
Oh, this is one of the classic ones. Like,
Yeah, I don't know why I put that. I don't know. It's super generic. It's kind of a yeah. Oh, that's what it was. Is like, you know, and it was. I kind of got it from the Kaufman article too. It's like, yeah, science, evidence based, but like, it's really slow.
yes.
And there's a lot of, and so just kind of I maybe want to look at a couple of like, and you know, like, okay, I'm doing. I think I was thinking specifically for like reading programs, and different stuff like that was kind of where I was going with that.
Well, a related issue there is what is referred to as the research to practice gap. Has anyone heard this term? Right. So think about an evidence-based practice. Who determines if a practice is evidence-based? Is it a teacher's kind of experience using it in the classroom? Does that provide the evidence? These are, you know, academics, you know, psychologists, educational researchers who kind of craft these very controlled kind of like, you know, instructional methods or treatments and then put them into action. So it's like, yeah, we have a lot of, you know, potentially useful stuff in the research literature, but how often does it actually make it back to the classroom?
Right.
And, you know, how frequently is that then implemented? I mean, it's been a very pervasive issue.
Yeah.
Getting a PhD in special education, that's kind of one of the first things you like learn about. You know, that's kind of, they want you to make that one of your goals, help bridge this research to practice gap.
Yeah.
So that's another really interesting one.
Okay. The other one was early intervention. So I stumbled across one that was specifically about early intervention and early sort of, I guess, I mean, like identification or like especially for like younger kids with ED. And I thought I was kind of reading through that article. I'm like, oh wow, like this is pretty cool. And so how early intervention can really be super beneficial to kids. The other one was behavioral intervention, so different types, different styles of behavior interventions and their effectiveness or ineffectiveness. Number 9 was about higher education access, which kind of went in, it kind of is the same as the effective transition planning, like the first one I picked, but it's in like specifically about students with disabilities going into college and how, you know, like how well does disability services work in a college? What does that look like for them? How do we get them, you know, navigating it and all that?
Well, right. One of the challenges there is
they don't have to.
Well, yeah, it's on them to present evidence of their disability, put everything into action. Whereas they're coming from, you know, 15 years of not having to really do anything. I mean, certainly they have to advocate for themselves to the greatest extent possible, but it's not like if the kid doesn't come up to you and be like, hey, are we going to have my IEP? That you're just not going to have the kid's IEP, right?
It's like, that's what when we have like our final transition, like IEP meeting with these kids, I always have like, here's your IEP, this is your copy, here's the number to disability services at Lane Community College, this is where it's at in the building, maybe go with your parents, take the, you know, like do you want me to call them? It's a whole thing, and it's a pain in the butt, and the disability services at our local community college is not, they're not that great. So it's, yeah, so
the big push is to improve self-determination. Have you all heard that term?
Yep.
Yeah. Self-advocacy and goal setting and achievement. So yeah, that would be another one that you wouldn't be hard pressed to find a lot of research articles on that.
That's my last one, was student and parent advocacy.
There you go.
So helping, you know, kids, students and parents advocate for themselves and for their students in effective and meaningful ways. So
Excellent.
that's it.
List. All very important issues. So thank you for sharing, Jessica. Okay, on with the next. Who do I have? I have Amy. So Amy, why don't we go through yours, and then I propose that we take a brief 10-minute break, and then we'll come back.
Okay. I chose to do response to intervention, RTI, for my first one. And the reason why I wanted to do that is I feel like it's a slow process, and sometimes students are, I'd like to see it be a little bit faster, at least in our school. I feel like we've got students who are second grade students reading 4 words a minute, and we're still delaying on getting them services. It feels like it's taking too long to do these interventions. And so that's what I'd like to look at. Number 2, poverty and homelessness.
Yeah.
I chose that one because I live in a community, the main part of the town where the school where I'm at, there is a large number of homeless children and children who live in poverty, and that's highly impactful for their education and for their mental health and what's going on in their lives. It's just it's a horrible issue that is very prevalent.
You couple the presence of some disability with malnutrition and an unstable home life, and it just exacerbates everything.
Yes. Yes. My third one was bullying among children in special education, and not only in like lower level special education, but like children who are gifted. There's bullying for all levels of students who are in every aspect of that category. And I found quite a few articles about that, and I thought it was very interesting because we need to find ways to educate students so that it's okay to accept everyone the way they are. And I just thought that to be a really important one.
You know, on the topic of bullying, I was thinking, and it's interesting because you have kind of maybe 2 different types of bullying directed at somebody in, students with disabilities. So maybe just kind of the making fun of the kid, or, the physical kind of bullying that we're all aware of. But then you also encounter these situations where, kids take advantage of like the social naivete of another student with a disability, and like get the kid to do things, or like go over there and touch, go pants that kid or something, right? The kid's just like, oh, they're including me in their games, I'm fitting in, and doesn't understand that, no, this is not okay. And they're actually just taking advantage of you, which is another more subtle but equally damaging form of bullying.
Yes.
So that would be interesting. What I don't know if people have really thought about kind of the different types of bullying. I mean, I know that they've thought about it, but I don't know what you would find out there. But
well, the fact that a lot of these kids already are struggling with the idea that they're different, and that's the target often of the bullying. And so it's just emphasizing that point to them even more, which can be, I'm sorry, it just upsets me.
Can I interject something?
Yeah, Rachel, go for it.
Okay, because the struggle that I've had in school, because I had last year was the first year teaching resource room at the school that I'm at. I had the 4th graders who are a very difficult group behaviorally, and now they're my 5th graders. So they're the oldest kids in the school, and some of the biggest bullies in the 5th grade are my kids. So I think that that's something people don't think about too, is like sometimes like, and I know that part of it is just because the majority of it is they have crappy home lives and they feel crappy. And so they take it out on other people. But I don't know. I always think about that, like just how to teach kids to not be the bully when maybe their critical thinking skills are not all there. Right. So just like another, I don't know. And then I also have heard, I don't know, I get like touchy about the word bully because I also hear it thrown around a lot. There is actual bullying, don't get me wrong, but kids also like to cry bully a lot. Like I've had multiple kids this year tell me that their teachers are bullies because their teachers told them to do something. I'm like, that does not make your teacher a bully. Not make your parent a bully. That's just being an adult. So just like I don't know. It's just interesting because bullying is such a weird thing where there's all these different facets and it's very complicated. And sometimes the issue is less, I don't know. I feel like the issue a lot of times underlying in all kinds of bullying, whether the kid's the victim or the person doing the bullying, is just focus on everybody's self-esteem. Because if you are intellectually delayed and you're being taken advantage of, that's a very different thing. But
Right.
if you're a kid who's susceptible to bullying because you have low self-esteem, and the kid who's bullying you probably also has low self-esteem, the solution might be to like try to build self-confidence in everybody instead of putting it on this kid's like a horrible bully and this kid's the victim. When really like they're all probably victims to their own like self-concept in like deep down, you know? I don't know.
Well,
I just think it's more complicated than people think.
a good intervention that you can develop in your free time. I think
I used to tell kids, I used to jokingly say that my only rule as a teacher was don't be a jerk.
Yeah, man.
I still kind of like go by that though. Like I can put up with anything except for you being a jerk, including to yourself. Like don't say that you're like a horrible person and all this stuff. And you know, like, come on. I don't know. So I was just thinking about that.
Important thoughts.
The next number 4 is Common Core state standards, which is really important. However, it can be difficult when you're teaching. Let's say I've got a 4th grader who is learning at a 2nd grade level, and I'm supposed to be teaching them at that 4th grade level, but that's impossible. They can't do it. They cannot do the material. So that's
standards.
what I didn't hear what you said.
I said you must follow the standards.
Yes, must. No, it doesn't make sense with some of that, and so that's my 4th one. My 5th one is transition, and that's from high school to college. And even though I don't work at that level, I still think it's a really important issue because these kids, like you say, they all at once have to advocate for themselves. So we need to be teaching them those skills in high school so that they can actually do that when they're on their own. And so I thought that was number 5. Number 6. Adequate resources to meet IEP requirements and the funding that is associated with that. Behavior issues. You're laughing at me, Kim, but this is big one. This one is a big one. We don't have enough resources to deal with all the behaviors and the things that are happening, and it is explosive at times. And it makes it so nobody's learning very much because of the situation. So that's my number 6. Number 7, family engagement, making sure that we involve the families not only in the IEP, but in their child's learning, making sure that they know what's happening throughout the year, not just at that one IEP meeting, and keeping them involved. Right. Number 8 is collaboration. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Tough one. I mean, right? Because I think it's pretty safe to say that, you know, the more that a parent is involved and on board with what's happening kind of in the school and supporting their kid to kind of achieve those goals, the better off the kid's going to be.
Yeah.
But maybe, you know, there are cultural factors or there are personal experience factors that, you know, kind of prevent that parent or make the parent not want to be involved. So it's like, you know, you don't want to tell, you know, the kid's parents what to do. So it's like knowing kind of how to approach that and to get somebody on board who might initially be kind of standoffish can be very challenging without kind of stepping on someone's toes, getting yourself in trouble.
Absolutely. I included collaboration with the next one because I've had to do so much collaboration this year with the staff at the school I'm in, and I couldn't do my job if I didn't do that. And I think it's really critical and important. My 9th one is gifted students. They often get overlooked, but they have needs that aren't being met. And often they fall through the cracks. And so I think that that's an important thing for us to worry about. Even we talked about that with bullying too. So
another form of difference, right?
Yes.
Kind of the common theme between, you know, somebody who is intellectually delayed and somebody who's gifted. They're different.
Yeah.
Right? They're on the kind of the, Michael showed you guys the normal distribution. They're out there on the tails. And when you're out there on the tails, you know, people notice.
Mm-hmm. My 10th one is inclusion. This is especially concerning with students who are like emotionally disturbed or exhibiting high behaviors. I want to make sure that we try to include them, but then there's a point where it's time to put them somewhere else because they are a danger to themselves or to others, or they're preventing their own learning, or they're preventing the learning of others. So I'm using that topic as an advocate for inclusion, and yet we also need to remember that inclusion is not for every single student. It doesn't all work for everybody.
Right.
There's my 10.
Cool. Given that, like, we read this paper that's, kind of largely on the topic of inclusion and, why, yeah, it's important, but maybe it's secondary to some other more important things that we should be worrying about. You mentioned the kid being in the classroom and, what effect does that have on his learning, and what effect does it have on the learning of others? We'll actually look at some of like the seminal court decisions that have served to define what the least restrictive environment might be, right? Because like the language in IDEA doesn't say exactly what the least restrictive environment is, right? So, basically courts of, different court decisions have led to like different tests for determining, okay, well, is this actually a least restrictive environment? We'll look at a few of those later today. Okay, so, well, I think we have time for one more before we take a break. Let me see if I have one more. Those are the only 3 that I have. Does anyone have one done that they would like to share? Oh, Erin, sweet. So why don't you share yours, and then we'll take a break then.
Okay, I turned mine in, PS.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so let me see here. Please hold. Please hold. So I did mine slightly differently, I guess. I didn't look at this from the standpoint of the research I was going to do, but just the 10 topics that I thought were the most important. So my number 1 being teacher preparation, both from the standpoint of the SPED teacher and the Gen Ed teacher. So then student safety. I chose student safety as number 2 because I had just been in a classroom where we did the run, hide, fight training. Has anybody done that?
No.
Alice?
Oh my God.
Alice training?
No, run, hide, fight for school shootings or for intruders in your building.
I had to do it here at EOU.
Oh my gosh, it was the first time I've done it, and we did the last half of it, and I was actually in a SPED. I was in the SPED classroom. I was just observing, and it was like tear-inducing because trying to get these kids to understand what we were actually doing was so difficult. And there was a student who has Down syndrome in there, and he's super noisy, and he didn't understand how to hide with the class, and instead he hid underneath the table he was sitting at, and he was squirmy and noisy. And then there was a student who was in a wheelchair, and we were trying to explain to him if there was really an issue, we'd actually like pick him up and like bolt out of the classroom. So like student safety has to be number 2. If they're not safe, then nobody's going to be good. So the parental support, obviously, you have to have the parents on board throughout the entire duration of the child being in school. Educational assistance, and I actually chose EAs because I was an EA to start, and having EAs in the classroom is super imperative. And if you're in a classroom without EAs and you've got a whole bunch of students who have disabilities, you're not going to get a whole lot done.
So then would you be interested in like, how do we better train them?
Well, how to better train them, and just the fact that you have them as an additional resource. We didn't, as an EA, years and years ago, we didn't have a lot of training. Like I remember the one training that we had, the teacher or the principal sat down and read like, "Oh, the places you will go to us." And then we had a discussion. That was our training. Like, what good are you?
That's an evidence-based practice.
Like, you're not doing anything for me right now. I got more use out of sneaking into the actual teachers' trainings and like hiding in the back corner. So educational assistant training, them just being in the room. Early detection and intervention, I spend a lot of time in the EI classes and the ECE classes, and being around that population is super important. And if they're not diagnosed at a young age, like we were just talking, we're gonna miss something. Technology. I was actually talking to my mom about technology, and I had been reading an article about how technology isn't just the smartboard or the iPad, but the pencil grip on a pencil can be considered technology, or a magnifying glass could be considered technology. And I couldn't get her to wrap her brain. I couldn't get her to wrap her brain around that. And I just kept having to explain it to her over and over again. And I just thought that it was very interesting. And I find it to be very interesting.
Yeah,
I
we
almost
just
kind of want
need to look at kind of the range of technologies that are available, not just, you know, devices and such, but like you mentioned, analog technologies, we could call them, not just digital.
I almost want to put it higher on my list because I find it to be interesting. Inclusion, we've already talked about inclusion and RTI. I was explaining RTI to my mom also because it's such a new buzzword in the field of education. That was my number 8. And then trauma-informed teaching, I have it as number 9. We've been doing a lot of trauma-informed teaching on out in Sandy and Gresham part of the state, and talking about how we're not just educators, but we're mentors and counselors, and we're caregivers, and that, you know, a natural disaster and parents going through divorces and having, you know, kids having fractured families, or, you know, them having their disability is a traumatic event, and we have to be prepared for that. And that it has become a huge part of the culture over here, to the point where there are more counselors out in the schools on this side, and they can't keep up. Homelessness is on the rise, poverty is on the rise, and the kids aren't able to handle it. And so teachers aren't able to keep up, and so they're
it's definitely
anyways. Okay, and then discipline was my number 10.
And so its use in the population of students with disabilities, or
so just deciding when it's appropriate. You know, is it a manifestation of their disability? Are they acting out because they don't understand what's going on? Are they having a meltdown just because they're confused? Do they need to be removed from the classroom and have a break? What is actually happening? Or is it to the point where they're actually needing to be removed from school? I didn't really have a defined reason for any of the things that I chose. I didn't realize, I guess, when I wrote this, that we needed to have a defined purpose for each of them.
Well, I mean, you've given us purposes for all of them. But even though you don't know that you had them, I think you do.
So those are my 10.
Cool. Well, what I'm really happy about is that I'm not seeing the same 10 things on everyone's lists, right? So everyone is kind of bringing some diversity into discussion, so that's good. Let's see. So I have someone just turned one in.
Probably me.
Rachel, okay.
I turned mine in just after class started, 5:30-ish.
Oh, did you email it to me?
No, I submitted it via Canvas.
Oh, no, Rachel, were you raising your hand saying that you turned one in?
Yeah, I just turned it in because I was like, it's been sitting on my computer. I just haven't turned it.
Refresh it then. Okay. Cool. Well, let's take our break. We'll come back. We'll hear from Rachel. She turned one in. If anyone else who hasn't turned one in wants to chat about your issues, that's fine. If you don't want to, we can move on to talking about the paper. So how about we meet back here at 6:15?
Kim, were you able to find the syllabus?
Not used to where the mute button is. I keep wanting to hit it on my like little buy box. You know how we could do that in Hangouts, and I'm like, it doesn't work. I'll be honest with you, I didn't bother to even look.
Okay,
But
it's there now, and it makes sense because it has this different titles. So I was able to get everything.
did you have to? I just put it down. Hold on here.
I went to both classes, and I was able to find that it made sense to me now.
550. I put this and then it just goes. Let me see what this is. It looks like the same link. Is it? I mean, is it?
So you go to the syllabus in the one class, the collaborating one, and you'll print that syllabus. That's what I did anyway. I printed it because otherwise it's confusing on the computer. And then I went to the issues one, and I printed that one, and they are different.
Well, if I clicked on the 550, okay, hold on. Is this one 550? Which one's 550? Collaborations. Wednesday 5 to 7.
So
What's different on it? If I go down.
the collaboration one is the one that has the resource map and the consultation plan down at the bottom. They have different assignments. I think that the classes all line up and are the same. But down at the bottom where it talks about assignments, that's where it has like the question sets, the review of the self-selected article, the resource map, and the consultation map. That's in the collaboration one.
Yeah, but it doesn't, it looks like, if I'm reading this right, he didn't change anything in the syllabus part. 12:11. 11:20. Oh, wait. 12:4, 11:20, 11:13. 11:06.
What are you looking at?
I'm looking at like the course schedules that I was looking at.
Oh.
Okay. Okay. And then if I go the other one, let me go back.
The issues in special education, if you go to the way I can tell the difference is from the assignments. Because it has the Kaufman and the Vaughn articles and the self-selected article, and then trends and issues in special education, that list that we just did, and then the annotated bibliography.
Oh, okay. He changed the title of it too and changed the.
Yes, it makes sense now they changed the title because I was getting confused.
So if I look at this one, 9:26.
So, can I ask you guys a question?
Sure.
So are we meeting every single Wednesday?
I think so, except for Thanksgiving week.
So we aren't getting like a week off here or there like we did before?
Well,
No.
that's okay. So if you look, I'm going to reprint them out, but that was the part that I was looking at, Amy. If I look at I'm gonna have to print them out because it looks like on 10/9 we still don't meet for either. Oh, wait a minute.
10/9.
Wait a minute. 10/10. Okay. But he left the 10/9 on here, which is throwing me off. And the 10/10.
10/9 is the Wednesday, right?
I think it is. I need a calendar.
It's a Wednesday, yeah.
So 10/9.
Next Wednesday.
But see, then on the other one it says 10/10.
Let me see.
That was supposed to mean to discuss something, but that would be a Thursday. Okay, let me print these. I'm gonna reprint these.
No, both. I think yeah, print them again because the new ones I just printed just now do not have 10/10. They both say 10/9, and one of them, the collaboration class, is the one we'll be talking about.
So we are having a meeting on 10/9 then.
Yes, it says chapter 1 discussion,
Okay.
which is the book.
Okay.
That's what we'll be talking about next week.
I just wish we just have it like, I don't know. It is confusing with one saying an A and then the other one's, you know what I mean?
Oh my gosh, why is it doing
On
that?
when we're meeting. And then I have a question because I thought all we had to do was write a list. Did you guys put a sentence down on all of the ones that you just were talking about, your trends?
I did an explanation, but he said he's accepting it as a list as long as you talk about it.
I did
Nice.
like a paragraph for each one before he said that he only wanted a list. And what I wrote is like an explanation of what they are, and I completely misunderstood the assignment. Everybody is talking about, like Daniel was talking about the topics that he was going to explore for the assignment for the articles later. I would have chosen completely different topics if that's what we were supposed to do.
I did the same thing as you, Erin.
Okay.
But I think that what he was saying is we can change our minds.
Yeah,
I'm not choosing these topics. I've been keeping a list of what everybody else has been saying, and I'm going to choose topics off of that.
Right.
Go and find different articles.
When Daniel started talking, I was like, oh, that's way more interesting than my list.
Yeah, my list sucks compared to what everybody else has said. Like, my list is so generic.
Right.
Okay.
Same.
No, I didn't know
We can just change our mind.
What'd you say, Kimberly?
I didn't know we were supposed to tie it in either. That wasn't clear to me. So mine's just a super generic list. I mean, some of them I'm really interested in, but I didn't realize that we were supposed to, I didn't know I was supposed to rank them either. So my list is not ranked. So while everybody's talking, I'm like, okay, I should probably rank these right now. I don't know.
Oh, I had my mom help me rank them, and then I had my husband help me rank them, and then I went back and re-ranked them, and then I re-ranked them again, and like.
Oh my gosh.
You don't have to actually like rank the whole thing. He just said put your top three.
Oh, I like started at the bottom and then I went to the top and then I went back through like over and over again.
Yeah.
This is the third time I've done an assignment.
I was confused too. I emailed him, and that's when he like put out the email that was like, hey, if you're confused. So I'm glad I wasn't the only one, because I emailed him about it because I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
No, I'm sitting here working on the community resource map assignment while we're doing this too.
I have not even touched that yet.
Oh, honey, be happy that you live where you do. Look at this. Look at this. You see all this?
Probably have so much.
Oh my gosh. This is ridiculous. Living out just outside of
I would just pick the top ones. I wouldn't kill myself on that. That's
well, no, we've got everything under the sun out here, and so
I'm sure.
He's like, choose 5 or 7.
Yeah,
I don't even know if I can come up with 5 or 7.
I know. I'll be lucky if I could get 5 to 7.
You'll be better than me, Rachel.
Actually,
I'm like, how am I going to do this?
Use Legrand. You should just use Legrand.
No,
like,
I found
probably will have to.
There was a website, you guys, that I found that actually had stuff for it had stuff for Legrand on it. Legrand was mentioned, and then Corvallis and Eugene were both mentioned.
Gina's quite a bit. That's where we'll probably get most of ours.
Like Eugene is gonna have to be our closest.
We've got
I know.
some stuff in Cottage Grove, but we are definitely linked to Eugene.
Yep.
Yeah.
Marta, where are you at?
Elgin, which is
Oh,
north
that's just
of
outside
LeGrand.
of LeGrand.
Yeah.
My parents live in Sumter,
Oh, okay.
Yeah. so it's like
Is it Baker?
this
Baker
big.
City?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you know this side a little bit.
Yeah, I do. I do. That's why when y'all started
There's some,
talking about
I mean,
LeGrand, I'm like, I got this. I get it.
yeah, I'll have to, Rachel, you and I might have to talk about what resources you put down on your map.
I haven't started it yet, but the ones that I know about because I'm like, related to people who do them.
Oh,
So-
yeah. You have a little in with your dad.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Just a little.
My husband's one of two vocational rehab counselors at DHS, and he works with all the high school kids. And then my mom's a mental health therapist who's like a licensed clinical social worker who works with a bunch of the kids too.
We've got an in with multiple people.
It's really
Hey,
entrenched in LeGrand school
I'm
system.
definitely wanting some share here, girl.
Yeah. So I'm like related to everybody who does everything in LeGrand.
Cool. Well, welcome back. So I see that Rachel had turned hers in. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you, Rachel.
Okay. Oh great. Let me pull it up because of course then I didn't get it pulled up to be prepared. It's right here. Also, I looked up the DSM-5 autism requirements because I was like, what is it actually? Because that didn't sound totally right. So it says that symptoms must be present in an early developmental period, but may not become fully manifest until social demands exceed limited capacities.
Okay.
So it doesn't actually have like
Not fully right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was
Somebody who
confused.
is like higher functioning is going to start experiencing those challenges later in life when the social dynamics start to become more complex.
Yeah. Well, I was confused because we have a girl
That's
who
interesting.
just got diagnosed, even though we're like, really? I don't know. But and she's like a fourth grader, so we were like, I was like, that can't be right. Then how did she get diagnosed? So anyway,
Thank you for the clarification.
oh yeah. Sorry, I was like, I don't know if I should say this,
You're my
but
fact
I'm gonna
checker.
say it anyway.
I'm gonna say it. If I say something incorrectly or make a false claim, you gotta call me out.
Okay, so the first one on my list, which I think is what I want to do because it's related to the article, but then also it's related to kind of like what's going on in my school district right now, which is trying to find good social emotional curriculums. So I put social emotional curriculums and then like talking about what's popular versus what's like realistic and attainable to do in a public school setting versus what has scientific data to back it up. So it's like, is there something out there that's like that magical thing that has all of those?
Have you heard of a woman named Michelle Garcia Winner?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
So she has a social emotional curriculum.
Who?
It's called Social Thinking.
Social thinking.
Michelle Garcia Winner.
She's a huge autism person.
Yeah, but certainly her curriculum could be adapted for other children with socio-emotional, delays or different.
Yeah.
Lori,
Okay, cool.
hand up.
Yeah, I used her curriculum to teach my own children appropriate social skills when they were little.
Nice. Did you use the Superflex one with like the comic book characters?
Yep, Superflex.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
No more
that's
rock
what I
brains.
thought.
No more rock
Yes,
brains, yeah.
Yeah,
yes.
it worked really well.
Does work.
Yeah, no, it's very popular.
Cool. Yeah, I was thinking about that just because the day that I started reading the article for tonight, my mom sent me an article that was talking about conscious discipline and how conscious discipline isn't very well backed up by research. It's kind of just like a popular thing right now. So I don't know. Then I've just been thinking about that a lot because that's what our school district is using right now is conscious discipline, but it's more of like a whole school thing, not really like an intervention.
Yeah.
So
Find that social discipline that what you're meaning by that?
conscious discipline, oh gosh, I can't remember her name, but it's this lady and it's really big right now. She has like a YouTube channel. If you Google conscious discipline, you'll see tons of stuff. And it's about like self-regulation and teaching kids to like not blow their lids is like the thing she says, like you blow your lid, and it like talks about the brain and the parts of the brain, but it's like very oversimplified. So that was this like this guy's complaint in the article that my mom sent me was that it's like an oversimplification, and he was saying that like it's good to simplify to an extent to make it accessible to the public, but when it's so oversimplified that it's like doesn't actually mean anything anymore, then there's a problem. But you can look it up. Like it has to do with like having calming corners and talking about I don't know, but it's more about like, it's less about teaching kids like replacement behaviors and more about just like kind of convincing them not to misbehave, sort of. I don't know. It's like a weird.
Sounds like it has like a mindfulness component to it. You're supposed to be
a mindfulness component to it. Yeah, so it's like teaching kids to calm down when you want them to, but not really going into why they're not calm in the first place. So it like kind of masks the issue as opposed to like going deeper into why is this kid having this issue to begin with. So that's kind of like what this guy's problem was with it. So anyway, I can share it if you guys want to see it, but it wasn't like a full article. It was just like an opinion piece by this guy. But yeah, so that was the first one. And then my second one is standards-based education and statewide assessments for special education students. So this was just on my mind because we are starting to have to talk about state testing already because they're like changing the way that they do it again. But just, just thinking about like, I don't know. I just feel like when it comes to state testing, I'm like preparing my kids to fail a test. It like seems like a really big waste of time because most of them are not like, especially when it comes to like the writing, where I have kids who write at like a first grade level in the 4th grade, but then they're having to take the 4th grade test. And it just seems like, what's the point? Is this like really a good use of time? And then going into like opting out versus like taking an alternative assessment and all that stuff. That's like a really complicated topic, but I think it's important and it's interesting.
Yeah. Like, what does a standard mean in a population of people who, are known for having very kind of diverse learning profiles? It's like, can you set a standard? Like,
yeah.
Context of so much diversity? I don't know. And then does it make sense to hold these students against the standard of, those students who are in general education who, kind of tend to, kind of perform within a narrow kind of range of, it's maybe more predictable in that population. No, it's definitely a huge issue in the world of special education. Specifically like making assessments that are valid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because like that you're trying to use to assess somebody getting in the way of you assessing what you want to try to assess.
Yeah, so like for example, the assessment we used last year, which I can't even remember what it was, but the test that the state has like adopted, the assessment criteria for the grade levels doesn't even match the Common Core state standards. So like they assess citing sources in 4th grade, but it's not a standard until 5th grade. So like why even assess it when we're not even required to teach it yet? So it's not even assessing the Common Core state standards. Like what's the point of it then? So the third one, which is kind of related to the first one, is access to mental health supports in public schools. So like, partnership with community partners that are state funded that have to do with mental health, and also like mental health that's available in school. So that's sort of related to the first one a little bit, but still like a big topic that's on its own. The fourth one, response to intervention and rates of referrals and how it affects the referral process. Some people already talked about that. It's basically like the same thing.
I mean, RTI is supposed to basically reduce the number of referrals, right? Or like catching students kind of in time. It's not like a fail-based system like education traditionally was. A kid gets referred once they've clearly fallen behind. You're trying to catch them before they fall behind, which in theory should lead to fewer referrals, but that's in theory.
Yeah. Well, and then like my school, did she just fall? Okay. My kid just fell partially downstairs. Sorry. Every day there's going to be my kid yelling in the background, I swear. My dad's with her. She is being monitored.
No worries.
Anyway, this is my life. But Yeah, so we have like sort of an RTI school, but not really all the way because we're not fully set up for it. So we get referrals for kids a lot of the time where they haven't really had good interventions, and then we have kids who get special ed for like a couple years, and then we end up exiting them because really all they needed was like good interventions, which they could have gotten in a school that had like a better intervention system set up to begin with. So that's part of it too. But then there's the other thing where kids sometimes will like not be tested soon enough because there's RTI. So yeah, all of that stuff. Number 5 was access to early intervention programs and preschools. And I was thinking more like in high poverty populations, and then also in like very rural populations. Like I can't remember where I was reading this, but like I was reading about access to early intervention and preschool in like on like more remote areas, or like specifically for like oh gosh, I'm blanking on the word. I'm totally blanking on this, but where there's like the Native American land.
Reservations?
Reservations. I was like, what is that called? That there's not very much access in a lot of those places. So, I was listening to it on a podcast. This woman was talking about like an online, giving people access to preschool online and stuff like that. So like kind of access in more like rural areas or more remote areas, which I didn't put that on there, but that's kind of what I was thinking. The 6th one, special education teachers' performance and evaluations and teacher shortages. So like how to find, train, and keep highly qualified teachers, which somebody else talked about that a little bit too.
Perennial battle.
Yeah.
Battle.
Yeah. So number 7, this is like a slightly political, but I don't like totally even know what my stance is on it, which is why I was like, well, I'll put this on there because it's really big right now and I'm kind of curious because I don't know that much about it. But keeping public funds in public education. So like private school vouchers, tuition tax credits, public funds going to private education entities, and then the effects of that on special education and on school populations in general. So like if certain kids are being like cherry picked for certain institutions, what's going to happen to like the public school population where you don't have a criteria to get in?
Yeah. No, that sounds like the topic of the title of a paper right there. Like I could see that, like in like a researcher or something.
I don't know very much about that. I just know that I like hear it a lot, and hear it as like a big like hot button thing. But I'm not a political scientist, so I'm probably not the best person to research it. But it is interesting. So number 8 is, again, what people have talked about, use of technology in special education, because that's like a big one right now. Although again, I don't find it like the most interesting. So that's why I kind of put it on when I was like, I'm out of stuff that I'm interested in. So I'm just going to start looking stuff up. Although I am interested in the next one because I started thinking about school discipline and students with disabilities. So like how often kids with disabilities, like emotional disturbance type disabilities, are getting referrals and suspensions and what can kind of be done about that. But also like sometimes those kids need to be suspended when there's like a safety issue and something needs to be put in place. So that's kind of like a tricky thing too. Right. And then the last one is facilitating successful transitions from high school to college or the workforce. And I just thought about that because I talk to my husband about it all the time. So yeah.
You know, it's a little low on the list in that your husband is in that profession.
Well, I work for elementary school, so it doesn't like affect me directly. I more worry about like my kids going to the middle school where people don't know them, but that's not like a transition issue as much as like a culture issue, I guess. I don't know, like a school culture issue. And then it's just hard when kids go to like a more secondary thing because they just like start switching classes and stuff, and it's not like you have the same teachers who like really understand you, and you're out of, you know. Now I've had kids that like after this year they're going to go to middle school having had me for 2 years, so I'm like, I know them really well, and so I get like worried about like, oh, everyone's just going to
no like formalized attempt to put you and this new teacher together so that you guys, you know, I mean,
yeah, no, there is. We have like we have transition meetings with the teacher before we go, before they go to the middle school. But I still worry about it because I have like some kids that are like very difficult behaviorally, but are actually like really cool kids and very sweet and well and like good intentioned. They just have like one has like really severe ADHD. That's like the kid that like one of the kids that like I see him all the time because he's overwhelmed in the costume. So he comes and sees me like all the time and wants to hang out. And I have to like threaten to hold his hand to take him back to class so he'll run away from me. And but like I worry about him because it's like, okay, people are gonna think that he's just like screwing around, but really he just like has really severe ADHD and he can't like, I just worry about him getting kicked out of class all the time when really he can't help it. He's just like super, super impulsive. Yeah. So I think more about that kind of transition, but that's more, yeah, like I said, it's more of like, I'm personally worried about like school cultures less than like a big topic that I could research.
Got it.
So
cool.
So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Rachel. Rowan, I have you next.
We were just talking about this before in the break, and my list is also boring because
Boring?
well, not boring, okay, generic.
Okay.
Because when I started listening to Daniel and other people's amazing lists, I thought, oh, actually, I want to do that instead. So are we allowed to change our minds after we've read you our lists?
You know what? I will not hold you to one of the things on this list. If you got inspired by hearing one of your peers talk about what they're passionate about, then absolutely.
I did, and then I couldn't stop thinking about my kids, and then I wondered why they hadn't inspired me before. Okay, so in no particular order, the things on my list. The first one is teacher prep programs. So I think we talked about this. Teachers not getting enough or any training during their teacher prep programs to enable them to effectively teach students with special needs. In the UK, when I did my teacher prep training, we didn't either. So it's not something unusual to hear. I mean, it was quite a long time ago, but we had nothing.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone
Were you
even mentioned.
aware of it? Like that you might need to look into this, but they just didn't train you?
No, I thought about it after I wrote this down. I don't think anyone even mentioned the word special ed in the whole like postgraduate year. I don't remember it because that's something I've always been interested in, and there was nothing. I mean, it was 20 years ago, you know, but still, no, nothing. Yeah. Well, I guess my students did inspire me for this. Student-led planning. So having high school students have more input, more voice into their IEPs as they get older, and also like preparing them to advocate for themselves as they transition to adulthood and to college. Also, that's
a very big one. I mean, it's also referred to as person-centered planning.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a few different like terms that are used just to talk about bullet point number 2 there.
Yeah. And I also thought that it would give like more insight for teachers if the students could talk about what teaching methods or what works for them, what they favor.
Right.
Again, RTI. So my kids are at a school, my little kids, my children are at a school that has RTI. And it was really working. I used to sub there a lot and I could see it working, and they lost the funding for it this year because we have a big budget deficit in our school district. And everyone, even as a sub, I was devastated because I could see how much it was helping. So they don't have that this year. My kids are not in the RTI process, but some of their friends were, and they've lost it. And it seemed to be working really well. Mm-hmm. In that school, I guess it doesn't everywhere. So I wanted to look at, that early intervention and screening. Transition planning. We, at the school that I work at, we have, it's quite magical. Her only job is transition planning for the seniors. And so I was wanting maybe to look a bit more at how she does that. I mean, her caseload is not very big. She does the IEPs, but only for the senior class and includes the transition planning in that. So, yeah, transition.
The ITPs, right? The individualized transition
Yes,
plans.
sorry, ITPs, yeah.
But it's part of the IEP, so you're also right.
Yeah. And yeah, she does their college testing and their transition planning, and that, yeah, when she retires, that's the job I'm taking. Using physical movement to enhance learning. Again, this was inspired by my children's school. They had last year, they did a trial run of having recess before lunch, and it made a huge difference to lunch times. It made a huge difference to my children, and the people that run lunchtime, the instructional assistants that run lunchtime, did not like it, and they've switched it back. And I don't know, I feel like it was a bad decision. So yeah, using physical movement to enhance learning, more recesses. The second grade class that my daughter's in, there's a lot of impacted kids in that grade, and they've added a recess to their whole day this year because they've realized that that particular grade need it more.
Right.
So
yeah, multimodal learning. I mean, it's very evident that the more you can involve numerous senses in a learning experience, the more effective children will learn material.
Yeah. And they've also been trying to introduce to them like flexible seating so that they can move around more, they don't have to sit at their one spot at their desk. So they're trying that with that grade too, because the movement seems to be helping them a lot. So that was one area of interest. Lots of people have mentioned this, but the lack of funding. We in Beaverton have a huge deficit this year and have lost 3 staff in their elementary school and RTI. So that was inspired by what my kids are experiencing.
Yeah.
An
issue.
Yeah. Excuse me. The shortage of shortage of special education teachers, lack of qualified teachers, high turnover, recruitment challenges because of the high volume of paperwork, people, and heavy workloads. People, I think, are turned off from
the work
this
pay ratio is skewed in the wrong direction.
Yep. Again, the inclusion argument was on my list that we talked about last week. I've also got assistive technology on there and placement of students. So those were more generic.
Okay. All, whether generic or not, they're all recognized issues in special education. So, but yeah.
I wanted to say something to Daniel, but there wasn't a point earlier. The high school that I teach at, Daniel, they instead, because a lot of our students are impacted with dyslexia and ADHD, they've chosen not to teach a foreign language as their language component, but they teach ASL.
Oh, cool.
So I don't know if you need anything from the 2 ASL teachers that they have, and they do a lot of work. The seniors, once they've done ASL 2, they do some kind of, I'm still learning what happens there, but some kind of, in the deaf community, they go out and they do carol singing in sign language.
Oh,
in
wow,
the community.
that's really cool.
So if you need anything, I can facilitate that. But I thought that was a super cool thing to teach them.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Pleasure.
Okay, so for those of you who are still formulating your lists, hopefully this was a helpful exercise, and I'm sure that you're overflowing with ideas. So, and again, if you did get an idea from one of your colleagues, you don't necessarily have to go with something on the list if it's, so, it's as long as it's relevant and you can make an argument for why it should be, investigated, then I'm fine with it. Okay.
So,
Oh,
so I'm a little confused. Can I ask a question?
Oh yeah, Kimberly, go for it.
So this is Marta.
Oh, sorry. I thought. Okay.
That's
So
all right.
Marta, go for it.
Just real quick question on this. I have a list that I've made, but I haven't added anything to it other than just what I'm looking at. I didn't put any, write any sentences, things like that. Because I kind of got confused with a couple of the emails that came out. It sounded like you just wanted a list. Is that correct?
I had said it was just a list, but in the syllabus, I had the verbiage saying that you should provide a description. I contradicted myself, so I didn't. The easiest way is just a list is fine.
Okay.
If you want to add some thoughts, that's also fine, but I'm not going to deduct any points for not doing that.
Okay.
Okay?
And I do have a list if you want me to go over.
Oh, yeah. If you are, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I'll be quick because we're getting close to the end here.
Okay.
My first one is going to be, needing more information on behavior support and management. Seems that I'm getting more children that's either ED or OD or different trauma situations.
Mm-hmm.
And our little town just doesn't quite have all the resources, so I'm needing more information and help with that. CHD has kind of started helping us a little bit, but we're still kind of behind the times there.
Right. So looking at positive behavioral intervention supports.
Yes. So supposedly we have champs in our school, but I find that you go into every classroom and it seems like there's a different management style or different classroom management base, I guess you call it.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm finding is that if I get a kid that I have doing well in one class, the next year we have to start all over again.
Right. You lose all that momentum that you generated.
Mm-hmm. Also, right now I have a kindergarten student who we're having a lot of difficulties with and trying to get a behavior plan put together. But I'm having a lot of resistance from administrator and teacher that they really just don't want this child in our school district. So it's really frustrating, and I'm having a really difficult time because the family's considered homeless. They're not technically Elgin's child, so it's one of those situations where I think they would like to see them go back to LeGrand. And so, it's like I'm fighting a battle right now with how we present this and how we work with the parent and all of those pieces together. So it's been an interesting, because I really didn't expect it from this teacher at all. So it was very difficult for me because we're kind of getting into this situation that I'm very uncomfortable with. And I feel like there's a lot of behind the scenes talk that's not being real honest at this point. So I just need more input, more information on that.
Right.
How do I support?
Communication can get in the way of effective collaboration.
Yes. Right now it's kind of hot. We had a big blow up today, so it was really hard. Anyway, so I just need more information, and anybody that has some things that they could help with that might have more experience than I do in that area, I'd love to hear from you. Another two is self-regulation, self-talk, because I do think I need to be doing that with this child, is teaching him how to regulate himself. And when you talked about the Superflex, I think it was Aaron said something about Superflex. I think that that curriculum is running around here somewhere, so I'm going to try and get that and look into that for him.
So a really good one.
Say that again.
It's Marta. That's a really good one. That's what I'm teaching right now to my kiddos in their social class.
And the strength in it lies in the fact that you're giving a concrete characterization to this feeling that's very kind of ephemeral.
Okay.
It works really well with kids with autism.
Identify with it because you embody it in a comic book character, superhero.
Yeah.
So for this little guy, I'm hoping that he'll because I was going to try zones, the zones of regulation, but I thought he was not going to respond to that. But a superhero, I think I could get him to do that.
Yeah.
All right, so next one is also the idea about collaboration with staff. That goes back to my number one, because I'm really struggling right now with that. But overall, collaboration with staff, I feel that's a really weakness in our school. Next one.
You know, it's interesting. Yeah. You know for a fact that as an educator, you know that you're supposed to be a good collaborator with your peers. That's how we serve students. And when you see people that aren't, it's well, A, either they just don't know that, or B, they don't want to be collaborating toward, the betterment of a child or whatever the shared focus is. So it's sad.
It is sad. And I think part of that is because we've had a huge turnover in staff in the last 2 or 3 years. So I think some of it they haven't pulled together, but it's more with the special ed and the general ed that you don't see that.
They're very compartmentalized, their own kind of territories, yeah.
Yeah. The other one I'm kind of interested in, I read an article on it this summer, and that's how our new Common Core standards are affecting our kindergarten students and how that's changing them as they're processing through the school, because we're so zoned in on academics with them that we're forgetting that they need to learn their social skills. They need more playtime. They need more use of manipulatives and getting down and being a kid, right, instead of having to sit like a little soldier at their seat. At least that's what I'm seeing a lot of. So it was interesting because it was saying, there was an article on it that I was reading. I think it was under understood.org, I believe it's called. And they were just saying that they're seeing signs of things with kindergarten students that they haven't seen in years because of the pressure that they're putting on. So they're kind of starting to track some students that have started with this Common Core and are going through. So they're starting to track them and see how that's affecting them, especially socially.
Right, and you look into play-based learning and stuff, right? Because that's ideally what a kindergarten should be doing, learning through play. And that's often more challenging, right, for somebody to implement a play-based learning curriculum than just having a kid sit at a desk and lecturing.
And do papers.
Right, no, that's easier to do than, it can be challenging to come up with kind of realistic and useful learning experiences in the context of play, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't know that they're learning. They're so engaged.
Yep.
So that's also a very good one.
Transition was kind of an important one to me in the sense that I'm going to be working with these 2 students that I have. So I want to get more information on how to help them. And I'm looking more at, it's called life-centered education. Have you heard of that?
Is it life setters or life centers?
Life-centered, I think is what it was. LCE.
I've not heard of it, no.
I wanted to kind of look at that because I'm thinking it's more directed to our students that are not necessarily going to be in a workforce or in college, but are going to need to have some skills of how to go maybe work in the library, the local library, or things like that.
Okay.
I'd like to investigate that a little bit. Early intervention, identification of and identification. I have kids that I'm getting that are coming into kindergarten. I have one little girl who has a chromosomal disorder. And she didn't have any early intervention. So now it's like trying to pick up the pieces and see where we can go with her. And I finally got mom convinced to let me get her evaluated. But it was just kind of surprising to see that we still have those situations where we're not getting that early intervention in for kids. Part of our problem is our kiddos that get identified here in Elgin, the only school that they can go to, a preschool, is in LeGrand. That is a true, what I would call a true early intervention preschool. They have Head Start here, and we have our own preschool that we have attached to the school, but they're not getting any kind of specialized training unless they have like a speech therapist that comes out. But other than that, it's not there. My grandson actually went to the one in LeGrand. We would transport him every day to make sure he got in there. And it made a huge difference for him getting that specialized program. I believe that we'll be identifying him as autistic. At this point, there's still the teachers are ready for it. I'm still having to work with my own son on that, but at least I got him in there through the communication piece. And so that made a huge difference. My son is just not ready to kind of
accept it
that yet. So we're working on that. Inclusion and placement, those are huge here. I like what we do, I have to say that, but I'd like to have a little more information on how I can serve those students better that we are doing the inclusion with. Co-teaching, we are actually trying that this year, and I'd like a little more information on that, and I'd like to see that being used more here if we could, because I think that's a strong way to get those kids in the classroom that are SLD kids.
Yeah, no, you can find a lot of information about co-teaching, like peer-reviewed literature. And even if you go on YouTube, I'm not saying that these are, experts, but there are demonstrations of co-teaching, and, having been an educator myself, it seems like they're making an appropriate effort at it. So there's a lot of resources for it. That would be an easy one.
I don't want it to turn in, what I worry about is it turning into the SPED teacher just being an aid, in a sense, instead of, right, Daniel?
For our other class, right, collaboration, if you've started reading, I don't know if they'd start talking about parity in chapter 1, or maybe it's chapter 2, but this concept of parity, like equal status. Just because I'm coming to your classroom does not mean that I'm one tier down from you on the ladder. We are equals.
Right. And that's I'm hoping we can address that well. Parent involvement, somebody else had mentioned that. That's huge here. That's the other thing that I think part of my job when they put me in this position. I've been here so long and had such good rapport with parents that I taught their kids, or, had taught them as students, that's where I came into getting some kids back into school that had been taken out of school, and how do I facilitate that more, and how do I give them more information on how to get their things that they need, get them involved in groups that could be supportive to them in our rural community. So how do I get them how can I support them in that? My other thing, trauma-informed education, someone else was talking about. We've got a lot of that, homeless kids, poverty kids, and all of that is important. And the last thing would be the RTI, because RTI, we kind of used it, but Amy, I think we're like you, it's takes forever to get a kid, and so I'm not getting those kids until they're 3rd or 4th grade, when we needed to get them in 2nd grade at least, if not sooner. So those are my things.
Cool. So good. This is a very A very nice discussion. Thank you all for sharing. What I would like you to do is, by the end of the week, Friday, just let me know what topic you're going to do. Okay? Make your decision. If that's enough time. If you need more time to think, just let me know that you need more time to think. But I'm hoping it won't take too long.
That's a good question.
I do too.
What?
Aaron.
Go
Okay,
first, Aaron or me?
Oh, there's a delay. Sorry. Okay. Let's
What,
go Aaron
Aaron?
first since you started. You're muted.
You're muted.
Sorry, I hit it and then I undid it. The topic specifically for our 10
Yes.
articles?
Yes.
Okay.
Kimberly.
Okay.
That was going to be my question because I have a list of 10, but I didn't understand that we were supposed to like rank them or any of that, and that one of them was going to be our focus. So,
Sorry. I thought I communicated that we would be selecting from the list. The list was to get your brain thinking about what might I want to focus on for the bigger project, the bibliography.
Well, I wasn't also in class on Thursday, so maybe you talk about it then. I don't know. Yeah, so I wanted clarification on that because I have my list here. I just didn't send it to you.
Okay. Well, we have about 5 minutes. You want to go over it real quick? I mean, it would have to be an abbreviated discussion.
Okay. I can do it really fast. Because a lot of mine have already been talked about. So, and a lot of mine, I have like certain things that I focus on a lot in high school. So, a lot of them are tied together, or they're the opposite, the polar opposite of what the first one is. So, the first one was about ED being on the rise, and then in schools and just why is it, and the tie-in to that one was another one was about the need for counselors, and this one was intriguing to me because we literally in South Lane, I think maybe the bigger schools still have their counselors, but the two rural schools who have a huge population need, and we couldn't even fill, we had like too many slots when we had a counselor, just is gone this year. We have no counselor at all out in my school or Jarena. And there's the increase in the social, emotional, and the poverty and everything. And then we've got the ED on the rise and we have no support at all. So those two went together. Then the other one that I've been fascinated with lately, and I don't know if this really works in this context or not, but is the retention of special education teachers in particular. And the lack of, one of them focused on the administration. And when administrators do not understand special ed because they've never had any training, how that affects teachers that are in special education staying. And then another piece that tied into another article that I read was also, it had to do with collaboration, but being able to collaborate with teachers and some of the hindrances and the helpers in there. One of them pointed again directly to administration. And we've had a lot of administration changes, especially in my building. So I'm experiencing some of this right now. So it's a hot topic for me. So these are not in any order. Okay, and people talked about technology, and I have a love-hate relationship, honestly. You know, I put in a lot of IEPs, especially for my ASD kids, for writing and using computers. But the downside to it is that too much technology also with special education isolates kids. And it's not just our special ed kids, but it isolates kids in general, and they don't learn those social skills. Yeah, there's social skills teaching on there, but it isolates them. And I've seen some of my Asperger's and my, well, I guess autism kids now, not understand real versus what isn't real and how to really interact properly. Right. So those are two more. Hold on, sorry. Oh, and then another one is, and I think it's easier maybe in some ways because I'm a small school. There's only a total of 5 of us, including me, teachers. And so RTI is not kind of a big deal for me. But what's interesting is how they're trying to tie RTI in with behavior and cheer interventions. That was another one. And tied in with that, which I've been reading a book as well about this, is when it comes to especially all kids in general, but especially emotionally disturbed kids, the whole like PBIS, check in, check out, that token society is on the decline as something that's actually beneficial because kids no longer have intrinsic values. They don't have self-determination. And you can see that kind of on the effect of their behaviors and how they are the me, what am I getting? I'm not going to behave unless I'm getting something.
Reward.
So that was another one. And then somebody else already talked about trauma-informed care. And then the testing for graduation, the state testing and the stakes in that versus really do our accommodations and modifications, are they really helping our children? Or is it just a blanket over the actual problem? And then the last one, which actually is kind of high up on the list for me, but when I was writing these out, I didn't rank them, has to do with dyslexia being on the rise. And is it really on the rise, or is it the way that we are teaching and our reading programs that we have for kids these days is that our practices kind of go through way too much, where if you look at past practices in reading, we actually address some of those phonics skills before, like, say, phoneme segmentation. So all those things are no longer addressed, and those are how you reach our kids with dyslexia, all those stages before this one stage. So this article was talking about, is it really on the rise? Has it always been there? And maybe we just process information a certain way. So those are my 10. I think I got them all. In no order.
The social construction of the dyslexia epidemic. There you go. That's a dissertation topic for you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This was a very fruitful discussion. I enjoyed it. I did also have plans to talk about the paper. Obviously, we didn't get to that, but I think we can talk about this paper, the Kaufman one, alongside the second paper that you're going to have to read, which is the Vaughn paper, because they're kind of talking about the same issue, but from different perspectives. So I will see you all next week, and if you haven't already uploaded your list to Canvas, please do so, and then start thinking about what your final choice will be for the topic, for the bibliography. So it's great to see you all. Have a good weekend. And Kim, I believe you and I were going to chat. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead